I'm Melissa. I'm the Director of Corporate Communications here at AAHOA, and I am so excited to be interviewing Jay today. So, Jay, please make yourself comfortable.
Thank you so much.
So thanks again for being here. Everyone is very excited, obviously, but before we get started, I was hoping you could help me out with something. It's been a very busy week here at AAHOA, at AAHOACON22, and my heart rate is still coming down from the fire drill we had earlier, so I was hoping that you would maybe show us one of your techniques and help us do a meditation so we could have a moment of Zen.
Oh, I love that idea. Is everyone ready for that? Okay, so I'm going to ask you all to keep your feet firmly grounded, if you can, rather than crossing or leaving them anywhere else. And then I'm going to ask you to sit up as straight as you can. You don't need to be artificially straight or uncomfortably straight. Just find a comfortable body position, resting against the back of the chair. And then you can keep your hands on your lap as I have, or if you like them crossed, that's fine too, but keep them away from having your phone in your hand or anything like that that may distract you, or holding something that creates a bit of weight. Then I'm going to ask you to gently and softly close your eyes. And I can see if you haven't closed your eyes because I haven't closed mine yet. So gently and softly close your eyes and bring your awareness to calm, balance, ease, stillness, and peace. And whenever your mind wanders, just gently and softly bring it back to calm, balance, ease, stillness, and peace. I want you to bring your awareness to 5 things you've seen this morning. It may be a person, maybe this room, maybe outdoors or the entrance. Bring your awareness to 5 things you saw this morning. And if you're struggling, you can gently open your eyes and just become aware of 5 things you can see around you. And then gently close your eyes once again. What are 5 things you can see? Become aware of the colors, the shapes, and move through them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Taking a deep breath and breathe out. Now, what are 4 things you can touch? Might be the dress or pants that you're wearing. You may have a jacket or a blazer on. And as you touch these items, notice the difference in the texture. Are they cool or warm? Are they soft or are they harsh? Just become aware of the different textures of the chair. Notice how different they are. And now bring your awareness to 3 things you can hear. Might be some white noise. Maybe you can hear a little distant chatter. None of it's a distraction. We're just being present. Taking a deep breath and breathe out. What are 2 things you can smell? Might be a perfume or a scent. Maybe you can still smell your morning tea or coffee. And finally, what's the one thing you can taste? Might be breakfast, toothpaste. With the 5 things you can see, the 4 things you can touch, the 3 things you can hear, the 2 things you can smell, and the 1 thing you can taste, you're now fully present. And you can gently and softly open your eyes.
I needed that. I don't know about you, but I feel very relaxed.
I think everyone's gone to sleep.
We'll pick it back up now.
Yeah.
So I was looking at your website. I follow you on social media, and I saw something on your homepage that made me laugh. It said, and I quote, "No one wants to hire you when your resume says served as monk for 3 years under experience." It obviously hasn't held you back. Can you tell us about that time in your life when you were a monk?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I grew up in an Indian family, and I'm looking out into the audience, and I feel everyone can relate to that, or a lot of people can relate to that. And I grew up in a family where I could either honestly be a doctor or a lawyer or a failure. And I chose option number 3. I went to business school. I was studying behavioral psychology, behavioral science, management science. I was fascinated about the human mind and philosophy and ideas. And so I was already going down that road. And then on top of all of that, I decided to become a monk. And that was really me annoying my parents. I graduated, but skipped my graduation ceremony because I'd already left to become a monk. So my mom doesn't have a picture of me graduating, which was always like a pain point in her heart when I made that decision. And when I came back from being a monk, it was pretty much the same thing. You know, today I've been able to share my experience and share my story, but when I left to be a monk, there was so much criticism. My community was telling my parents that I was wasting my life, that I'd made a bad decision, that I would never get a job again, that I would never make money again, that I'd wasted all the effort my parents had put into my education. And when I came back, they were like, "We told you so, you know, we told you that's exactly what would happen. You know, no one's gonna hire him now." And it was true. Despite being a straight A student and a first class honors degree graduate, I got rejected from 40 companies the year I came back. And I got rejected before I got an interview. So they wouldn't even see me. They wouldn't even let me into the room. And what's really amazing is that I've always felt that my 3 years living as a monk were like being at school. And since I've left, which has now been 9 years, these have been the exam. And I realized that those 3 years living as a monk taught me how to manage my mind, whether it was through difficulties, whether it was through rejection, whether it was through dealing with lots of pain and insecurity or uncertainty. Those 3 years helped me develop a set of skills that don't make things easy, that don't mean that I don't have issues. It just means that I feel I have a toolkit to reach out to that help me navigate. So that time included waking up at 4 a.m. every day, which is a lot of discipline as a 22-year-old. It included living out of a gym locker, so all my possessions fit inside a gym locker. We slept on the floor, and you had no bed that was yours. You'd put out a mat every night. You'd put it in a different place every night. There was no space that belonged to you. And you didn't have a bank account or any money that was to your name, and you were constantly thinking about serving others. And when you live in that way, it sounds really tough and difficult, and it is. It's fairly challenging. But now when I look back, you start to realize that when you've had that experience and you are still able to be happy and joyful, you start to recognize that there's a lot more to joy and happiness than we perceive in the material world. So that's a quick answer and quick version of that time.
Okay, I love that. Is there anything you learned during your time as a monk, like a habit you picked up or something that you still do to this day?
Yeah, so one of my favorite habits was that we would wake up and make sure that our first thought was a grateful thought. And this was a really fascinating habit because if you think about it, when you wake up in the morning, chances are your first thought is, I want to go back to bed, or I'm really tired, or I wish I didn't have to do that thing that I have to do today. Most of the time, our thought in the morning is not a grateful thought. It's not a fulfilling thought. And studies show that we have 60 to 80,000 thoughts per day. And studies also show that 80% of those thoughts are negative and they're repetitive. So we keep repeating that negative thought throughout the day. You wake up in the morning and you say, I'm tired. By lunchtime, you're like, oh, I'm still tired. And then by the end of the day, you're like, I'm exhausted. So now you've repeated that thought throughout the life cycle of a day. And if you can change the first thought of the day, you could change the thoughts for the rest of the day. So now imagine when you have 60 to 80,000 thoughts per day, but 80% of them are grateful, are positive, are fulfilling. So what I would do, there's two ways I've done this. One is I would have a Post-it note. You're allowed Post-it notes as monks. I would have a Post-it note next to my table that has the question on it, what are you grateful for today? It would be the first thing that I would see in the morning. Or I would write down one of my favorite thoughts or favorite quotes or favorite affirmations that I loved, and I would stick that next to my bed, and then I'd wake up to that next to that in the morning. So if you can change your first thought of the day, you will transform your thoughts for the rest of the day. And we underestimate the first and last thought of the day. So that also applies to when you're going to bed. Take a moment. You can make it the screensaver of your phone. You can make it the screensaver of your laptop. Make it easy for yourself to remember a message that allows you to be more in a grateful mindset.
That's amazing. And you talk about that a lot on your podcast. And obviously you have a book out, Think Like a Monk. And you've just kind of led an interesting life. You've interviewed celebrities. I think I read Kobe Bryant, Khloe Kardashian, Giselle, Alicia Keys. Does it sometimes not feel real?
Definitely. I mean, so I've been living in the States now for 6 years. I lived in New York for 2 years, and I've been in LA for the last 4. And there are so many times where I'm like, I can't believe this is my life. And someone actually just asked me a moment ago, backstage, they were saying, like, they asked me a question and they said, when did you know that everything was going to take off? And the honest answer to that is, I didn't. I've never lived in the belief that you have to believe you're going to become something or you have to believe anything. I know this is very counterintuitive for someone in my world to say this, but I don't believe you have to sit there and believe. I believe you have to sit there and set intentions and take action. And so for me, it was always setting an intention of service and taking action on that intention rather than sitting there believing that, oh, maybe one day something will happen in my life. And so for me, I feel really grateful that I have these amazing relationships. And I think that's one of the biggest things that, for me, it was always, how can I have relationships with these individuals? How can I actually build a connection with them, not just interview them, but how can this turn into an actual relationship where they feel trust and an openness to share what they're really going through?
You also talk about your childhood a lot in your podcast and on social media. How do you think that your childhood shaped who you are today?
Yeah, so I was bullied for being overweight and Indian because we didn't have a lot of Indians in my area. And at that time, I guess people found it easy to make fun of people. I was largely overweight growing up. I ate 4 chocolate products a day. Chocolate biscuit, a chocolate yogurt, a chocolate ice cream, and a chocolate bar.
Sounds delicious.
It was amazing, but highly unhealthy as well. And I was bullied for that. And I feel that being bullied for me was a really interesting experience because it didn't stop me from developing confidence. It actually helped me become more empathetic and compassionate. And so I know what that felt like, getting beaten up at school or coming home and feeling like I just wanted to break down and cry. And I remember those experiences so viscerally, and I promised myself that I never wanted anyone else to feel that way. I was like, I don't want to be the reason that anyone would ever feel that way. And so I think for me, when we go through difficult situations or we go through challenges, when we feel we've healed from that, one of the biggest gifts you get is going, I don't want anyone else to feel this way, and I want to limit the amount of people that will feel this way. And I think I've tried to carry that through and carry that on. And so today when I live a very blessed and privileged life, an amazing life, I think for me that element's always in the back of my mind that, don't forget the people that are often left unconsidered or unserved.
Is that why you're often talking to people and telling them to better themselves, empower themselves, things of that nature? Making wisdom go viral?
Yeah, I just really believe that everyone sitting in this room right now has such incredible potential that they're unaware of. I genuinely believe that everyone in this room has potential far beyond what they believe they're capable of. And I remember that I've had mentors in my life who would constantly say things to me like, Jay, you're not living up to your potential. And I'd be like, no, I'm proactive, I work hard, I'm organized. And be like, Jay, you're not living up to your potential. And I'd say, no, I've got my life under control. I know what I'm doing. And every time I was wrong, because I realized that we get so limited by the people we're surrounded by, we get so limited by society, we get so limited by the highest achiever in our space. So usually our limit is set by the highest achiever we know. And when I say highest achiever, I don't just mean financially or success-based, I mean from a happiness point of view too. If no one in your immediate circle is joyful or happy, that is your happiness limit. So if anyone in your circle has any limit, financially, mentally, emotionally, physically, psychologically, that is the limit you've put on yourself artificially. The joy we have today is we get exposed to so many new ideas through social media, through YouTube, through podcasts. There's so many ways of accessing people that we could never meet. And that way we get to expand that limit base. So for me, I would really look around and say, think about it for a moment, like who is your financial limit in your life? Like who is your happiness limit in your life? And ask yourself, are you happy with that? Are you okay with that? Are you comfortable with that? And these are uncomfortable things to look at. These are not easy things to look at because it requires change. It requires you to step outside of that comfort zone. And as a society, we're so bound by our desire to conform, to fit in, to make sure that everyone feels like our life makes sense to them. And while you're on that path trying to make sure your life makes sense to other people, it stops making sense to you. While you're trying to prove to everyone else that your life fits together, your life's falling apart inside for you. And so for me, I've shifted my complete focus on not whether my community or society feels like I'm taking the right steps, but do I feel like I'm taking the right steps? Do I feel like I'm living the life I want to live? And that journey takes daily courage. It never ends. It never stops. It's something we have to recommit to daily.
So speaking about comfort zones, you recently on the radio talked about asking yourself, what are you bad at? And that struck me as interesting because I know for myself, we all like to think about what we're good at. So my question for you is, what are you bad at? And why is that question so important?
Yeah, can I ask you a question back just to clarify it?
Sure.
Do you mean, I'm not going to ask you what you're bad at. That's not part of the question I'm going to ask. Do you mean what I'm bad at skills-wise or emotionally? Like, do you mean more from a professional point of view or from a personal point of view? And I'm happy with either or both.
Let's do skill.
Okay, so I am terrible at PowerPoint. No, sorry, take that back, not PowerPoint, Excel. I'm horrific at Microsoft Excel. I'm terrible at spreadsheets. I know I'm letting my community down big time. I apologize. I do not enjoy spreadsheets whatsoever. I avoid them like the plague.
Don't tell Neil that.
I have no interest in them. And it's really fascinating because when I started my career, I started at a place called Accenture. And Accenture is built on Excel and PowerPoint. Like that's what you focus on as a new analyst. And everyone said to me, you had to be good at these two things. And I went all in on PowerPoint and Keynote and presentations, which is my natural skill set. And I never have to look at a spreadsheet in my life. And it's such a, fascinating way to think that we, again, dial into like, okay, well, I have to know all these things. And when I looked at the most healthy, wealthy, and wise people on the planet, most of them live this way. They look from the perspective of, what am I great at, and how can I go all in on that? Versus, what am I bad at, and how can I become average at that? If you work on something you're really poor at as a skill, chances are you may get to okay. But if you work on something you're already naturally good at, you could become exceptional at it, and we reward exceptional in the world, and exceptional is also where the joy is. Now, there is a caveat to that. If we're talking about your skills in terms of professional skills, it applies to that. If we're talking about emotional skills, you should work on what you're bad at. So if you're a bad listener, if you're not good at being empathetic, if you're not compassionate, These are things that we should work on. So that only applies to hard skills where you focus on your strengths. You don't have to focus on your weaknesses. But when it comes to your emotional skills, you should focus on your weaknesses, and you can't just cover it up with your strengths, if that makes sense.
I love that. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. As I was walking to this session, I saw someone carrying your book. So naturally, I walked up to them, and I said, "Oh, are you a fan?" I said, "Well, yeah, but it's really my daughter who's a big fan. She's a nurse." And I said, "Oh, well, I'm about to interview Jay. Like, if she has any questions, have her reach out to me." So she sent me a question. I thought it was
love that.
It was very appropriate for the time we're living in right now. And she said, "What advice would you have for nurses, healthcare workers, people on the front lines who are feeling a little burnt out?"
I mean, I shared that study when we started from 2019. And so I can only imagine how much harder it's got over the last 3 years. And I really do believe that our frontline workers live the most difficult, challenging lives out there, and anyone in that space. I would first of all like to acknowledge just how incredible it is. Right? I just want to acknowledge how incredible it is what they do every single day and how they stay resilient in the face of the biggest difficulties on a daily basis. You know, sometimes we may have to evacuate a room because of false fire emergency. They're dealing with people who've just been exposed to real fire. Like, when you think about that and you compare that, you go, wow, like that requires a ton of resilience, a ton of courage. So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge that. The second thing I'd like to say is that it's so vital and important that even the tiny bit of time you get per day, that you do something for yourself. If that's just 5 minutes, if that's 10 minutes, that you don't ever feel selfish or greedy, giving yourself permission to do something for yourself. I think so often people in service-oriented careers feel so guilty when they give themselves something because their life is devoted to serving others. And I would like for them to rethink that because your life is devoted to serving others, please don't ever feel it's selfish or greedy to invest a little bit in yourself. I send my love to the nurse that asked the question and to all her fellow team members as well. And yeah, I hope that helps. Just don't feel guilty. Give yourself that permission.
I think they'll really appreciate that.
Thank you.
So AAHOA is all about hospitality, generational success, the American dream. Do you think that having genuine hopes for the future and just the drive to be successful is the first step to actually being successful?
I think the step to being successful in any industry comes down to a couple of things. And this is probably not the most inspiring answer, but it's the honest answer. And I think often we get lost in motivation and inspiration, which kind of feels good for the moment, but it doesn't actually work. Like, if you can't action that and it makes you feel a certain thing, it kind of has its limits. Success is based on two things: sincerity and strategy. Sincerity means how deeply and intentionally do you actually care about what you're doing. If you don't deeply and intentionally care about what you're doing, you'll never study the history of your industry. You'll never study the future of your industry. You'll never know what trends are winning. You'll never know what people actually think and what they're saying. You have to be obsessed with the human experience part of whatever you're doing. People find it shocking, but when I'm on social media, if you see me reply to a comment, if I've ever replied to a comment or I've shared your story, that's me doing that. I'm actually sitting there looking through comments, looking at what people are saying, looking at what people are thinking, replying, sharing stories, responding to people, DMing people back. If you get a DM from me and it's personal, it's me. And so my point is that I do that because I care. I do that because I want to be in touch with my community. And when you want to be far away from that and you say, oh, I just want it to happen anyway, you lose touch. And so I think that sincerity is key. And the second part is strategy. I think you can want to be successful, you can set a goal to be successful, But it all comes down to what is your strategy. And a strategy is different to a plan. A plan is a set of actions with a goal. A strategy is a perfectly designed, focused attempt at a particular goal. Strategy looks at what's happening in the market right now, what's happening in the industry right now, what are consumers thinking right now, right? Strategy goes far and above and beyond just saying, we want to make this much money, we've got to do this. Like, that doesn't exactly correspond or isn't sustainable because it's not amplifiable. You can't repeat it. So to me, getting strategically focused is huge. So when I'm trying to build a new business, a new brand, a new area of my work, I'm always focusing on the sincerity and the strategy. And so I would move away from an obsession with success and actually move towards an obsession with sincerity and strategy.
If anyone in our audience here today is dealing with a personal struggle, what advice would you give them? What advice do you give people that come to you for wisdom?
Yeah, personal struggles are tough because they're so different, right? Like, it can range from, I was just tired this morning through to I lost a family member. And I think that's what I would encourage people to do right away. Inside my book, I have something called the perspective scale or the worry scale. The perspective scale is when you're dealing with a challenge, you have the ability to rank that challenge on a scale of 1 to 10. Now, if the scale is blank, every problem feels like a 10, right? Anyone ever felt that before? When the email didn't go through and you feel stressed out about it, it feels like a 10. When your boss sends you something last minute for you to complete, it feels like a 10. When your child is struggling with something at school, it feels like a 10. Anyone ever feel that before? Right? We've all experienced that. Everything feels like a 10 when the scale is blank. But if on the scale you put 0 and you put 10, and on 0 you write, I trapped my finger in a door, right? And it's not broken, it's just maybe swollen a bit. Like, that's a 0. Maybe that's even a 1. And 10 is, I lost all of my family, right? That's a 10. 10 is, I'm losing my family. Like, that is the worst thing that could possibly happen. And again, you can subjectively define what is the worst thing that could happen. If you now start ranking your problems on that scale, I promise you a lot of problems are not going to feel as big anymore. Because a 10 now is really a 10, and a 0 is truly a 0. So now when something comes up in your life, you go, well, where is that? That's actually a 3 when I look at it from that perspective. That's a 6. Oh, wow, 9. I can't give anything a 9. That would have to be really bad to give it a 9. And when you start looking at your problems for what they are, this is correct diagnosis, right? It's the same way as we give the example of, like, if I wake up today and there's a little rash on my skin, if I go and Google what that rash is, I'm going to think it's terrible. I'm going to think that I'm, dying or something's really wrong with me until I go and diagnose it properly. And so that tool allows you to diagnose it properly rather than making everything feels like the worst thing that could possibly happen. And so I think putting things into perspective is one of my favorite tools to give people. It's a tool you can do with yourself without me being in the room. And then you go, okay, well, if this is a 5, let me calm down about it. Let me cool down about it. I can actually deal with this. Rather than letting your emotions and mind tell you this is an 11 when in reality it's a 5.
I love how passionate you are, and just the way you speak about things, you can tell that you really believe this. This means a lot to you. And I saw recently that you were nominated for the Best Influencer Webby Award. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, awards are definitely fun. I enjoy receiving awards because I feel like it acknowledges the mission more than it acknowledges me as an individual. So when I started making videos and podcasts, the things that went viral were babies, dogs and cats, or people doing pranks and things like that. And when I set out to have this mission of making wisdom go viral, wisdom didn't go viral. Those were not the topics of conversation in the mainstream. And so today when we get nominated for awards and have won awards in the last couple of years that have been very, hope-giving, to me it's a sign as society that it's not me, the person being rewarded, but it's the ideas being rewarded. And to me, if we're living in a world where these ideas are rewarded, that's a healthy shift. That's a really healthy movement. So for me, I love accepting awards on behalf of the amazing ideas I get to represent, my mentors, my teachers, my guides. And yeah, whenever I get an award, I always pass it on to them.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope we win. Make sure you vote.
So obviously, anyone can Google you and a lot of things pop up, but is there anything that you could share with us about Jay Shetty that we can't Google?
Oh, that's a great question. Wow, it's hard when everything's become so public now. I have to really sit and think about that one.
No pressure.
Well, everyone knows I'm married, so that was news to people when I first announced that.
How'd you meet your wife?
Oh, that's on the internet. There's a full 1.5-hour podcast episode that details that entire journey. I'm a huge Manchester United fan. I love soccer more than anything else in the world. If I could have been a soccer player, I would have. I couldn't, so hence I do what I do today. I absolutely adore the game. I love playing it. I love watching it. I love FIFA. I like PlayStation. Like I'm fully a normal human being who loves all these things. I'm addicted to chocolate. I love chocolate. I am plant-based and vegan, so I only eat vegan chocolate now, which is nowhere near as good. So I've somewhat curbed my addiction, but I absolutely adore chocolate. It's my favorite food. If you ever want to send me anything, or you need anything backstage, then you bring some vegan chocolate, then, that's the way to get into my heart. What else do people not know about me? Oh, my first ever job. Oh, yeah, my job history is interesting because I don't think people are aware. People are like, oh, he was born a monk, right? And then he just, yeah. No, definitely not born a monk. I used to deliver newspapers. I was a paper boy in my area, and so I used to do newspaper rounds for like 2 years. Then I worked at our version of, well, I think it's the same here, Morrison's. So we're at a grocery store, so I worked in a grocery store, worked my way up inside a grocery store, worked in retail. So yeah, hopefully those are a few things that no one knew, but I hope so anyway.
I like that. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's a great question. I love it. Yeah, I don't have a natural answer. I think people know a fair bit about me.
So if anyone in our audience wants more information about you, wants to listen to your podcast, read your book, how can they do that?
Yeah, so if you're on social media, we're on every platform. It's at Jay Shetty, so that's easy, whether it's TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and any social media platform. And then the podcast is On Purpose on any podcast platform. You can also search my name and it will come up as well. And that's it. Yeah, those are great.
Can you...
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your book? What's the subject?
Yeah, so Think Like a Monk was written 2 years ago. It's been really fun having it out in the real world. It was launched during the pandemic when almost everyone was living like monks. So it was ironic that, the book came out at the same time. It wasn't planned that way. And the book's dedicated to everyone who wants to live with calm in the chaos. Anyone who wants to live with stillness in the craziness. So if you feel like you live a busy, hectic, fast-paced life, but want to live in that world with more centeredness, with more balance, with more togetherness, then that's what it means to think like a monk. So the reason I wrote Think Like a Monk and not Live Like a Monk is because I don't live like a monk anymore. I'm married, I have a home, I have businesses, I make money. I didn't do any of that as a monk. But I'm still able to think like one in my fast-paced, busy life, right? I got on a plane, I landed at 4 a.m. today. I'm here right now, I jump on a plane straight after this. I fly to London, then Dubai, then, I'm moving around constantly. And so my external life no longer looks like the life of a monk, and I'm sure yours doesn't either, right? I'm sure we can relate to each other's lives. But what if you were able to move through that life with stillness, with calm, with centeredness? That's what the book is dedicated to.
And how about your podcast? Is there something you can tell us, like a sneak peek for something coming up or anything like that?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, we have a lot of good and exciting guests coming up. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, which in my calendar is one of the most important months in the world. I mean, I think it should be every day. That's a really, really exciting one. We have some amazing I can't tell you who, but we have some amazing Bollywood stars lined up for the podcast. I'm very excited to speak to a few of my dear friends in that community. And we have some incredible people from the world of sport that are lined up as well. But again, try not to share names. I want you to anticipate them, look forward to them, and get excited, but can definitely share those with you.
Okay, awesome. We have just a few minutes left. I want the audience to walk away with one final thing. If there's any piece of advice or anything you want them to take away leaving this Q&A today, what would that be?
Yeah, I would ask yourself 3 questions that I want you to walk away with. As you walk out of this session, I want you to ask yourself one question. What do I want to do more of in my life? Do I want to play more sport? Do I want to go to the gym more? Do I want to eat healthier? What do you want to do more of? And this week, make sure you make time to do more of that one thing. The second question is, what do I want to do less of? What is something you're spending too much time on? What is something that you know is just draining your energy, whether it's emails, or maybe you're like me and you're like, I watched too much TV in the pandemic and I don't want to watch TV ever again. Right? What do you want to do less of in your life to give yourself back time? We always think about making more time. Sometimes we can create more time by removing something in our life. And the third question I want you to ask yourself is, who's that person in your life that you always share good news with and bad news with? Who's the first person that comes to your mind that you can share good and bad news with at any time? Can everyone think of someone? The first person that comes to your mind when you think about sharing good and bad news. I want you to message them after this session with no news, just thanking them, just sending them love, just letting them know that you're thinking about them. No news, no good news, no bad news, just thank them. Because here's the fascinating thing about life. There are people in our life that we can't share good news with because we're scared that they'll feel envious or jealous. They might feel agitated by our success. And there are people in the world that we can't share bad news with because we think they'll judge us for complaining, or they might think we're weak. So if you have someone in your life that you can share good news and bad news with, you want to let that person know that you love them. And I want you to do that right now.
I'm going to do that as soon as I get backstage.
I love it.
Thank you so much, Jay, for being here.
Thank you so much.
That was so much
happy
fun.
to spend time with you. That was amazing.
Wasn't that great?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. So grateful to meet you all. Thank
Jay
you
Shetty,
so much.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much. You were awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. It was so nice to meet you.